It's time to start doing predictions. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pick out some good games, and each team in that game, I'm going to predict their season as well as that particular game. So I'm going to do that game prediction and the season prediction for each team in that game. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. Don't forget, guys, Golden Blue Dude does have a sponsor. It's called Tri-State Wood Sketch, and you can find them on the internet at www.tristatewoodssketch.com. He does amazing work. He can do any shape or size. All you have to do is send him the picture that you want on there. And if you mention that Golden Blue Dude sent you, he'll take 20% off. Now it's time to start my predictions. The grind begins. So the first game that I picked out, you might not expect. You were probably guessing maybe Georgia, Clemson. No, I'm going with LSU at UCLA. I think this could be a very interesting game. I think it's going to be overlooked, and you shouldn't do it. This is going to be a good one. First, let's talk about the visiting team, LSU. Last year, they went 5-5. Right now, they're being ranked number 17 in the nation. That's an interesting ranking. Ed Orgeron did not like what he saw last year, so he went out and got a new offensive coordinator in Jake Peetz and a new defensive coordinator in Durante Jones. So both the offense and the defense will have a new look. Altogether, LSU will have 16 returning starters. That's good news for Tiger fans. The bad news is Eric Gilbert, a great tight end, is now with Georgia. That's going to sting. That's okay. You still have plenty to work with on offense. Starting with quarterback Brendan Miles. He's back from a freak abdominal tear from last year. The coach Orgeron says he's still having to earn that quarterback spot. I think he'll do that. In just 3 games, he was 79 for 131. That's 60.3%, threw for over 1,000 yards, 1,112 altogether. 11 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. He has all 5 of his offensive linemen back. I think LSU is going to be really good in the run game this year. They have running back Terrion Davis-Price. Last year, 104 carries for 446 yards, 4.3 yards a carry, and 3 touchdowns. Also, running back John Emery Jr., 75 carries for 378 yards, 5 yards a carry, and 3 touchdowns. Have a lot of experience coming back at wide receiver as well. Wide receiver Tayshaun Boutte, 45 receptions for 735 yards and 5 touchdowns. Also, wide receiver John Trey Kirkland, 13 receptions for 184 yards, 3 touchdowns. And wide receiver Jeray Jenkins, 23 receptions for 397 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think they'll have a better running game, but the passing game is going to be pretty good as well. The biggest issue that LSU had last year was with their defense, especially their pass defense. They allowed 323 passing yards per game and allowed 34.9 points per game. That's a lot of points. So I think the defense must and will improve this year. All their defensive linemen are back, and they have a solid 8-man rotation, starting with defensive lineman Ali Gay. He had 32 tackles, 19 by himself, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 1 interception. Defensive end Lynn Logan, 17 tackles, 5 solo. And then, of course, defensive end Neil Farrell Jr. This guy's pretty good. 25 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble. I think LSU has a pretty good linebacking core as well. Linebacker Andre Anthony, last year, 24 tackles, 13 by himself, 5.5 sacks. Linebacker Damon Clark, 63 tackles, 26 by himself, and 1 sack. Linebacker Mike Jones Jr., 26 tackles, 13 by himself, half a sack, 1 forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. He's the transfer from Clemson. That's going to be a big boost. They also grabbed Navonte Strong. In 12 games last year, he had 104 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. He's a JUCO transfer from Mississippi Gulf Coast, so they're going to be fine at linebacker. It was the secondary that was the big issue last year. I think they're going to be much, much better this year. Their quarterback duo is being held as arguably the best returning quarterback duo in the nation. I'm not too sure about that, but that's what's being said. It starts with cornerback Derek Stingley Jr., 27 tackles, 19 by himself, 1 forced fumble, and 1 pass deflection. His counterpart, Cornerback Eli Ricks, 20 tackles, 11 by himself, 4 interceptions, and 5 pass deflections. They have some decent safeties as well. Safety Jay Ward, last year 29 tackles, 21 by himself, 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions, and 6 pass deflections. Safety Todd Harris, 30 tackles, 20 by himself, 1 forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. And they do add the transfer from Georgia, Major Burns, so they're going to have pretty good depth at the safety position. Let's take a look at LSU's schedule. First, the game at UCLA. That's a toss-up, but I will have a prediction at the end of this. After that, McNeese, Central Michigan, at Mississippi State, Auburn, at Kentucky, Florida. Then here comes a road trip to Oxford at Ole Miss. Then they get their bye week, and then right after that, a road trip to Alabama. But then after that, they get Arkansas at home, UL Monroe, Texas A&M at home. So to me, 3 games will determine LSU's season. The first one at UCLA, and then the road trip to Ole Miss, and then the road trip to Alabama. That could be the difference between a 10-win season or not. And I do think LSU has a pretty good chance to get to that 10-win mark. Now let's look at UCLA. Last year they finished 3-4. They are the home team in this matchup. Now, their unofficial ranking, from what I'm seeing, is 32nd in the nation. That's actually pretty high. But I've also seen 57th, so I don't know what their true ranking is yet. I will say I do think head coach Chip Kelly has this team pointed in the right direction. Their offense was great last year. They averaged 455 yards per game and 35 points per game. Really good offense. All 5 offensive linemen are back, and they helped pave the way for the 12th best running game in the nation. I didn't know that. Starting with quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's a dual-threat quarterback. Last year, he was 90 for 138, 65.2%, threw for 1,120 yards, 12 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. But he can also get the job done on the ground. 55 carries for 306 yards, 5.6 yards a carry, and 3 touchdowns. I'm telling you, keep your eyes on this kid. I think UCLA once again will have a tremendous run game this year. First up, running back Britton Brown, 82 carries for 553 yards, 6.6 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns. They added Michigan transfer Zach Charbonnet. Last year, he had 19 carries, 124 yards, 6.5 yards a carry, and 1 touchdown. And they also have running back Keegan Jones, 15 carries, 73 yards, 4.9 yards a carry, and 1 touchdown. That's a great yards per carry for every one of these running backs. I do think the passing game will be much improved as well. It starts with their wide receiving core. First up, Dylan Hunt, 8 receptions, 122 yards, 1 touchdown. Next up, wide receiver Chase Cota, 11 receptions, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then wide receiver Kyle Phillips, 38 receptions for 370 yards and 5 touchdowns. But I do think that their go-to target will be their tight end, Greg Dulcich, 26 receptions for 517 yards and 5 touchdowns. This guy will be one of the best tight ends in the nation. Keep your eyes on this guy. Just like LSU, UCLA's defense was a major weakness last year. I think UCLA's defense takes a big step forward this year. They returned most of their production from last year, so that's a good start. Last year, they allowed 410 yards per game and allowed 35 points per game. So you can see how that could be a problem. You averaged 35 points per game, but you also allowed 35 points per game. The front 7 for UCLA led the Pac-12 in sacks. That was a surprising stat that I found. Starts with their defensive line. Defensive end Mitchell Agude, 24 tackles, 18 by himself, 2.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. Also defensive end Carl Jones, 21 tackles, 12 by himself, 2.5 sacks. Defensive tackle Daytona Jackson, 15 tackles, 10 by himself. And then to go along with him, defensive tackle Otito Agbonya, 16 tackles, 7 by himself, 1.5 sacks. So they also have some good linebackers. The first one is linebacker Bo Calvert, 28 tackles, 16 by himself. But the alpha in the linebacking core is Caleb Johnson. Last year, 44 tackles, 22 by himself, 5.5 sacks. 7 of those tackles were for a loss and 1 interception. The dude is a beast. Let's look at UCLA's secondary. Last year they were shaky, but they did come on strong late. They allowed 274 passing yards a game. That is terrible. But 8 of their 9 interceptions came in their last 4 games, so they finished strong. Here's who they have coming back. Cornerback Jay Shaw, 24 tackles, 17 by himself, 2 interceptions, and 1 pass deflection. Cornerback Mo Osling, 26 tackles, 18 by himself, himself, 1 interception. Cornerback Obi Eba, 19 tackles, 16 by himself, and 2 sacks. He likes to come off that corner and sack the quarterback. Here's their safeties. Safety Stephen Blaylock. This guy is a tackling machine. 42 tackles, 28 by himself, 2 interceptions. Safety Quentin Lake, 33 tackles, 22 by himself, 1 interception, and 4 pass deflections. And they also added a transfer from Kent State. Safety Quantrez Knight. Last year he had 39 tackles, 28 by himself, and 2 pass deflections. So I think UCLA's defense is going to be legit this year. Maybe not elite, but I think pretty good. Let's take a look at UCLA's schedule for 2021. They start off with a home game against Hawaii, and then the big game against LSU, but they get it at home. Then they get their first bye week. UCLA has 2. After that, a home game against Fresno State, at Stanford, Arizona State, at Arizona, at Washington, Oregon, at Utah, then their other bye week, Colorado, at USC, then Cal. I think they win against Hawaii, Fresno State, at Stanford. I think they can beat Arizona State again. They did it last year, and this year they get them at home. I think they can pull the upset there. I think they win at Arizona. I think they beat Colorado, and I think they beat Cal. Now, their losses. I think they lose at Washington. I think they lose at Utah, and I think they lose at USC. The 2 toss-up games. The home game against Oregon and the home game against LSU. The goal for this year is for UCLA to get to a bowl. I think they do that. For me, it's how many games past the threshold can they get to. I think UCLA gets to 7 wins easily. It's can they get to 8 or 9 wins? That's the big question. So they have 3 sure losses and 2 toss-ups. My season prediction for UCLA is 7-5. Now for the actual game. This is a very evenly matched matchup. Closer than people realize. I think both have great offenses and both have up-and-coming defenses. There is a tiebreaker, and I think it goes to LSU. And I think it's because of the return game. I think that will be the difference. LSU has a really good return game. Derek Stingley Jr., their punt returner, he averages 16.2 yards per punt return. That's a game changer. And Trey Palmer. This dude is dangerous on the kickoff returns. Last year, he had a 93-yard kickoff return for a touchdown against South Carolina, and I think that is the difference in this football game. I think it's high scoring, back and forth, but that return game is what will set LSU up for the win. I'm going to take LSU 42-38 in a great game. So with me giving LSU the win against UCLA, I am predicting that LSU will have a 10-win season in 2021. That's a big bounce back year for the Tigers. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.